Good afternoon. It's Christina, also known as Black Shekinah. Welcome to the channel. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and I hope that you enjoy the topic today. So, on my inaugural, or one of my inaugural videos on the channel, I had a question about what is Shekinah and why is Hebrew important to me? So, I wanted to discuss that in this video today, and I had already planned to talk about that next. So it really worked out. So Dan V, I hope you're listening today because that's who asked the question. So I'm going to have to give a little bit of my story in order to bring you up to why I chose the name of my channel to be Black Shekinah and why I am putting myself out on YouTube as that. Doesn't mean I am the Shekinah. That's why there's a moniker on the front of it, but it is something that I very much relate to, and I do want to share a little bit of it. So I have notes. So if I keep looking over, it's because I'm looking at my notes. I didn't want to leave anything out or just ramble. So first thing is I wanted to give a very brief explanation about my spiritual journey. I probably will do some other videos going a little bit more in depth, but today I wanted to talk a little bit about the journey first. So I grew up as a Baptist, Black Baptist. I'm going to use the word Black Baptist because there is a cultural difference on Black Baptist versus other Baptist churches. So I want to say Black Baptist Church in Ohio, which is where I'm from. And I pretty much grew up in the church. I got baptized, I think I was 13. I sang in the choir, very involved in Sunday school. In fact, I really liked Sunday school. I really got a good foundation on the basics of the Christian faith. And I would not leave any of that to the side at all about my faith. I got good home training, as we say in the Black community. I definitely feel like I got that. I got the basics of right and wrong. I got that you need to be a good citizen, that you need to help those that you can when you can, that let your yes be yes and your no be no. I got the very, very good foundation on morality from my upbringing in the church. So, somewhere I would say maybe in my 20s when I really started to do a little bit more deep diving on some of the topics. Of course, I had a lot of my own thoughts anyway. All teenagers do. I questioned a lot of things. I still do. Questioning to me is a healthy thing to do. Uh, but I did come to think about the idea of God, and I'm using the word God here just because it's easier to talk to everybody about that. I'll talk about some other words for that later. But um, the idea about God being male, and that in the Bible, it's all in English is he. And somewhere along the line, it occurred to me, you know, if there's women and there's men, and humans are made in the image of God, then that feminine, that female presence has to be in God, or else there would not be a female. You don't get something from nothing, right? So, somewhere along the line, it occurred to me that God is not a gender. And you would think that should have occurred to me earlier, but for whatever reason, it occurred to me God is not a particular gender, or God is both male and female. And when I say male and female, it doesn't mean I felt like that God has genitalia or that God has a sex, but just to refer to God as he would be inaccurate. Like, so in my mind, God is he and God is she. So somewhere along that time, I started to really try to get away from always saying he because I felt like that was inaccurate. And I am a type 1 on the Enneagram and a Capricorn. I like to try to be accurate by what I mean. So that thought was kind of running around in my head. Okay. So in my early 30s, I'm kind of skipping ahead quite a bit. Like I said, this is going to be brief, but in my early 30s, I began to have even more questions. I began to do some studying. I began to be introduced to some information that I had not seen before. And after I began to do that research, I decided that I needed to study the origin and history of Christianity. And I did not stop there. I read about that, but then I began to go backwards. So my whole idea was go backwards until you can't go backwards any further. So where did Christianity come from? An offshoot of Judaism. So I took a Judaism class. And I really liked a lot of the things I learned there. And I realized that some things that are in Judaism did not make it into Christianity, and some things that are in Christianity did not come from Judaism. So that gave me pause. I thought, well, why is there this discrepancy? What is that about? And I'm hoping to get into some of that stuff in the other videos on my channel, so I'm not going to deep dive here. But, excuse me, there are some questions that I had about that. And in the process of the questions, the study, I ended up leaving the Baptist church and I began seeking some other assemblies. And I did a lot of study on my own, but I went into more of the metaphysical range of things. I started studying African spirituality because I felt like, well, why was African spirituality demonized? What's that about? I read a lot about, the faith of our founding fathers of this country. I read The Age of Reason. I just read a bunch. I was looked into Egyptian iconography and the background of Egyptian spirituality, and found a lot of correspondences there. So I just wanted to find out. I was a sponge. So, in the midst of that, I began to associate with a particular ecclesia, and I'm going to call it an ecclesia, called out people. That's what that means, called out ones. And I am a member of that today with a teacher that I have been studying with for years. And in the process of becoming a member, I got more information about the Shekinah energy. And Shekinah, I had heard something about that. I had learned a little bit about it, but there's a lot more explanation and works out there about the Shekinah, which is the feminine presence of God. You can sometimes people equate it with the Holy Spirit, which is also kind of a feminine energy of God. We also can talk about the Shekinah as having to, at one time, being together with God, but then there was a break, and now that reintegration is happening in the world, and that's playing out in our history. So there's a lot of things that you can go onto, a lot of paths you can go onto about the Shekinah. And I'm not going to go into it all right now, future videos. So that is what the Shekinah is. I also have seen the Shekinah as a guide. There's a mothering energy of God. And the thing about this is that in the English, you do not see that feminine references to God. You don't see that in the English. You see it more in the Hebrew. So that goes to the second question that Dan B had as to why I want to study Hebrew. So I began to pick up a little bit of Hebrew when I took the Judaism classes, and now I'm doing more actual studying of prayers and different things so I can learn them. I have learned the letters, the Aleph Beit, and I'm going to do some videos about that, on what things I've learned from meditating on the Aleph Beit. Um, so it's very important because this is a very big piece of my path. And I actuality on a call with my ecclesia, a situation happened where I felt that the Shekinah power was speaking. It may sound woo woo, it may sound whatever, but I can't help what it sounds like. But I heard that call, I heard that energy speak to me. You call it spirit or energy, whatever you want to call it. But I heard Shekinah speak to me. And ever since then, I have been wanting to know more and to really dig into interacting with God through the feminine energy. I think we have been conditioned to only approach God as a masculine energy when really God is both, is all, the all. You know, we use the word God, but that's a German derived word. We can use that word, we can use some other word, but that's what we use in the English language, so that's why I'm using it now. But it's multi God is multifactorial. It's not, we cannot define God. At least in my, this is my opinion. So we cannot define God. It's all in all in all. Masculine energy, feminine energy, the energy of nature, the forces of nature, all life, growth, love. It encompasses all of that, even things that we don't think are good. It encompasses that. So that's where I am right now. I am studying Hebrew so I can better understand how Judaism or Hebrewism understood the Shekinah, understood God, understood the all in all force, the Most High, all these different names that we have for that force, that spirit. So that's where I am right now. That's why I have decided to call this channel Black Shekinah. Well, okay, so that explains the Shekinah part. The black part, well, first of all, I'm black, and I use that term advisedly, but I am a descendant of Africans who were enslaved in the United States of America prior to it becoming the United States of America. I'm a descendant of those ones. And as I began to study, I have bloodline from West Africa and from South in Africa, from East Africa. And we really don't think about the fact that Islam, Judaism, and Christianity all began in what we now call the Middle East. But there really was no such term as that until later. Middle East is really Northeast Africa. That land, that the Levant was connected at one time to the continent of we call Africa, Al-Kaaba line. It was connected there. So the people that lived in that area are not completely separated from the people on the continent. And the way we talk about it, especially in the West, is almost like these were completely different people. The same way we talk about Egypt being like the completely different people than the people in the South. It's that way today because of conquering, because of colonialism, because of a whole lot of reasons. But that is not how it was in ancient times. So I decided that I want to reclaim that Northeast African slash Middle East faith that I was brought up with, but was brought up with it from a Western point of view. And in my opinion, a lot of how the West has appropriated and shifted that faith has not been good. it's actually been detrimental in a lot of ways. And I am looking to reclaim the heart of what I grew up with, because I connected with the teachings of Yeshua. I connected with the teachings of what it means to be saved. I connected with these stories in the Hebrew Bible about people coming out of enslavement and going into freedom. I connected with the story of Tamar, the story of Ruth, the story of uh, Esther, the story of Deborah, the story of Leah, the kind of scorned wife. I've connected with these people because the story spoke to me. So whether or not it happened in history, that's one thing, but the story is what I connected with. And I want to understand the story of the Shekinah, which is not talked about a lot in Baptist tradition. It's talked, at least not as my receiving of it, but there is that energy there, that feminine power that's there. And I am looking to learn more about it and discover it. And so, being a descendant of Africans, being a woman, and then learning about the Shekinah, I decided to call the channel Black Shekinah. So I hope that explains to you where I'm coming from at this moment. I plan to make more videos going into little pieces of this spiritual journey that I'm on. And I'm continuing it. I'm going to be 50 in January. So I'm looking toward new things coming forward in my second half of life, because I do plan to be a centenarian, just so y'all know. But anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this talk, this little explanation. And if you have comments, please comment. I would love to dialogue with you. I'm all about the dialogue. So again, this is Black Shekinah signing off. Shalom, peace, happy Sabbath.